Welcome to Wicked Ambiguity, a dark fairy tale, which I have to turn my mic on for, or else you will not be able to appreciate it quite as much. How about now? All right. A dark fairy tale. Today I'm taking you on a journey through time and space, and we're going to span 2.8 trillion years and 1.2 quadrillion miles. So yeah, I hope you all went to the bathroom before sitting down. And I'm your host while we go through these vast reaches of time and space, and I'm going to make sure that none of us gets lost and everyone makes it back safe and sound. Now, I cut this talk down by about 20 minutes to fit for Creative Mornings, so you can find slides, a transcript, and even video of the full version at bit.ly/Raycats. Yes, Raycats. I promise that'll make so much more sense by the end. Now, do you remember being a child and your parents telling you, don't worry, everything's going to be fine? But you really thought they were lying just to make you feel better? Because it was dark, you were cold, or you were scared? Kind of like right now in the laser dome. Well then, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. It's a story we tell to project confidence and security. And it's a good story, but it's also a hard promise to make. Because maybe, just maybe, everything's not going to be fine. And what happens to our story then? Now, at least one of you is going to walk out of here today and say, this talk has nothing to do with design. And someone else is going to walk out and they will say, this talk has everything to do with design. And you know what? You're both right. Stephen King once wrote about an idea he calls the shape under the sheet. And he said that when you're alone at night, and it's dark, and it's cold, and the wind is blowing, the house is creaking, the shape you see, the shape at the foot of your bed, the shape under the sheet, well, it could be just about anything. Anything at all. Except that we know it's our body making the shape, but we don't. Because for a moment, our fear creates ambiguity as to what is real and what's not. And that is the nature of fear, the unknown. And it makes us want to drop everything and run away as quickly as possible. And when you're running, the last thing on our minds is design. Because design dares us to stop running and to start solving problems. And that, my friends, that is your special nature as designers. You dare. So let's talk about some of these problems. What is the biggest problem you can think of in design? Well, I know the one we tend to talk about the most. Yeah, everyone thinks we're a bunch of creatives. They don't take us seriously. They think we're just here to make things look pretty. They think we can only change the form of things and not the function. I mean, after all, there's so much more you can do than just make things look good, right? Maybe you're really a user experience designer, and you're creating new experiences and solving hard problems by focusing in on people's intent. And I know, all the designers in this room cringing at my use of Comic Sans. Is it intentional? Was it a mistake? Maybe I was just lazy. Ambiguity. Maybe you're a developer, and you're engineering sites, apps, features, the systems and code that drive all of our experiences. Or a researcher, and you're asking the hardest questions, practicing empathy to discover how people live and work, think, and believe. or an information architect structuring data for the interfaces that connect people with back-end systems, or a content strategist like me, working with language, interfaces, people, and the connections, but usually the disconnections between all of them. I know this is a problem, and I know it's something that we spend a lot of time talking about. And we use all of these titles to frame our work and to talk about the impact we have. But I just don't think our differences matter all that much, because we are bound together by something else, a greater force. We dare to stand united against ambiguity. And that's really what all of us here have in common today. Abby Covert, who's the president of the Information Architecture Institute, says, "We make the unclear clear." That's our secret strength. So forget all of these divisions. We solve our problems together, or not at all. But what about the shape under the sheet? What if you are faced with a problem that is so vast and complex that you can't solve it no matter what you do? Now here we face a different sort of quandary called a wicked problem. Wicked problems appear throughout all societies and cultures and history, and they're a special class of problem that we can't solve because they have no final solutions. And they're so complex and interdependent that their factors and outputs become blurred. We can't make sense of them. In 1973, the social scientists Horst Riddle, whose photo you see here, and Melvin Weber coined the term wicked problem. And they found that wicked problems are unique. They resist definition. Each of them has factors and requirements that are constantly changing. Wicked problems are extremely expensive to take on, and they're impossible to test. Let's look at an example of a problem in the field of public health. This is a map of London, 1854. And like all maps, this tells us a story. This is the story of the cholera outbreak. Hundreds of people were dying, and no one knew how the disease was being spread. Now, each black square represents a case of cholera, and these yellow circles show all of the public water pumps. And so a doctor named, and this is true, John Snow. Oh, good. I'm glad to see so many fans of The Hobbit here. John Snow linked the disease to contamination of the water at the pump sites, and he did this with statistics. He used math to determine the cause and location of the infection. And once he made that link, all it took were simple sanitation measures to cause the disease to die out. And so you might say, "You know nothing, John Snow." But I'll tell you what. John Snow knew enough to save London and invent the field of epidemiology all at the same time. But even so, this is what we call a tame problem. Sure, it was hard to figure out, it was challenging, but it had isolatable factors and a clear solution. A lot of us deal with tame problems like these every day, and while they're challenging, they do have final solutions. So when it comes to wicked problems, we're talking about something entirely different. Think about poverty, drugs, war, climate change. These are wicked problems that have no final solutions. They aren't just challenging, they never end. They don't just link to other issues, they are massively interdependent. And we can't solve them, but we have to try. So we pull at problems like these, but for every strand we grasp, another flies through our fingers. Our solutions are unraveled by deeper interconnected challenges, complexity after complexity, constraint within constraint. It's frustrating. But more than that, it's heartbreaking. It's tragic. Because these problems pull at us too. And I know that because they pull at me. They pull at my strings, and they make me want to give up. And that is the poison of wicked problems. They sap our will to dare. Because when we encounter the shape under the sheet, we know it's us. We know the shape of these problems because it is our shape. So I'm telling you about these wicked problems because I think we face them every day in our work too. So today, I'm going to tell you 2 stories. The first is how we should design for aliens. A dark fairy tale. Over 200 years ago, many people believed that intelligent beings might live on nearby moons and planets, but we couldn't travel to them yet to find out for sure. Even so, people wanted to communicate with them anyways, so they tried to come up with ways of doing that even before radio was invented, and design was the tool that they chose. In the 1800s, Joseph Littrow, an Austrian astronomer, proposed using the vast Sahara Desert as a sort of canvas. And he said that we should write messages on this canvas that aliens could see as they zoomed by the planet. So he proposed digging giant trenches to create shapes and letters nearly 20 miles wide. And then he said, let's pour kerosene into the trenches and set it on fire at night. And this would create a huge visual message that could be seen from the sky. And this way, we could send a new message every single night. It might even serve as a form of advertising. But why stop? Why stop there with setting our own planet on fire when there are so many other planets out there? Charles Crow, an inventor, was convinced that pinpoints of lights he observed on Mars were, in fact, the lights of large cities. So he spent years of his life trying to get funding for a gigantic signaling mirror that he would use to make contact with the Martians. Now, he said we should focus the mirror out on the Martian desert, and the intense, reflected beam of sunlight would let us burn messages into the Martian sands. And so now, instead of using our own planet as a canvas for messages, we could use other planets too. I mean, come on! What self-respecting species of aliens wouldn't want us to get in touch by setting them on fire? I just want to take a moment here to say that, all of these people throughout history who wanted to burn shit up, they were men. All men. Every single one of them. Men. They were men. So, much later, scientists stopped setting things on fire just long enough to ask whether there were actually any aliens to communicate with in the first place. In 1961, the physicist and astronomer Frank Drake came up with this equation, and it uses probabilities to estimate the number of potential civilizations in the universe. The same kind of math that helped Jon Snow save London. And while the Drake equation is imprecise and full of holes, it served as a catalyst to get scientists talking and daring. Each symbol in the Drake equation represents a variable, such as, say, the probability that an alien species has invented radio communications. And if you plug in the lowest number for each variable, you'll find that the number of civilizations scattered throughout the universe is very, very low. 8 times 10 to the negative 20. Now, that's a 0, then a decimal point, and then 19 more zeros, and then a tiny little 8. And it means that we're all alone in the universe. On the other hand, if you're feeling optimistic and you plug in the highest numbers for each variable, you'll see that the universe is rich with life. There's over 36 million civilizations out there. And what lies between these two figures? Ambiguity. Now, this image is taken from the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecraft. And here we see a man and a woman, a hydrogen atom, our sun's location in our galaxy, our solar system, even the planet where we all come from. And it's such a rich story, so full of science and humanity. And it was designed by someone you've probably heard of, Carl Sagan. And as you know, Carl Sagan was one of the greatest designers and communicators who ever lived. I hear he even did a little bit of astronomy on the side. In 1977, Sagan helped design the two Voyager probes with their golden record showing the diversity of life and culture on Earth. The Voyager probes are now the furthest man-made objects from us, about 1.2 quadrillion miles away. And the scientists who built them solved the tame problems of engineering so well that they're still transmitting data to us, even today. Now, the Golden Record contains photography, greetings, and music from all around the world, as well as instructions for playback that are actually etched onto its surface. But inside, the layers of data are far deeper than in previous messages. Among all the data on the Golden Record is this: the brainwaves of a young woman named Anne Druyan. She was a member of the Voyager project team. This EEG recording was made right after she and Carl Sagan told each other that they were in love with one another. And after the recording, Druyan said that her subconscious was buzzing with the euphoria of the great idea of true love. The great idea of true love. So one of the most powerful feelings we've transmitted out into the depths of the cosmos is also one of the most personal, the most intimate. It's not meaningful because it represents everyone on Earth. It's meaningful because it's a shared connection between just two of them. Its beauty isn't in scale, but in uniquity. Only the smallest scope can inspire the heights of empathy. But will aliens understand any of this? Will they be able to decode and replay these messages? And what action might they take in response? These questions pull at us. And how can we expect aliens to solve these problems when we have so much trouble solving them ourselves? We're challenged by the shape under the sheet in the signals we send to the stars. And while we might laugh at some of these historical efforts to create that link, those early scientists stood united against ambiguity as they tried to make the unclear clear. They dared. So we've looked more than 200 years into the past, and now we're going to leap ahead almost 3 trillion years into the future. Hold on to your butts. We're going to see how designers are communicating the threat of nuclear waste to future generations. Now, whether they're used as weapons or as fuel to create energy, processing nuclear materials leaves behind waste products. And this waste is so dangerous because it emits radiation that destroys all life as we know it. And yet, you can't have weapons or generate power without that waste. And using nuclear power keeps us from extracting and burning fossil fuels that pollute our environment, causing climate change. Are you feeling conflicted? I know I am. But wait, what's this? See, even the barrel itself is feeling the conflict. So what should we do? How do we communicate the dangers of nuclear waste to future generations that haven't even been born yet? First, we need to understand how long the threat of nuclear waste will last. Meet plutonium-239. It's a radioactive element used as a nuclear fuel, and it has a half-life of just over 24,000 years. Now, that means that it burns off 1/2 of its dangerous radioactivity over that amount of time. And every 24,000 years, it burns off another half, and so on. So let's say that in order to become even remotely safe, a chunk of plutonium-239 has to go through 4 of these half-life cycles, meaning just shy of 100,000 years. On the other hand, uranium-235, another common element in fuel and weaponry, has a far, far greater half-life. Over 700 million years. It takes U-235 over 700 million years to burn off just 1/2 of its dangerous radioactivity. And if you go through 4 of these cycles, you get 2.8 trillion years. 2.8 trillion years! So, my friends and neighbors, if you think this talk is dragging on, oh, no, 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 no. That is nothing compared to the half-life of uranium. So what should we do? How do we keep people safe from nuclear waste over these vast periods of time? Now, our usual approach as designers of using systems, structures, language, colors, symbols, they just won't be relevant to people living that far in the future. And even when we look just 10,000 years into our own past, all of those things fade away quickly. And that's why the US government, recognizing that this was indeed a wicked problem, created what they called the Human Interference Task Force. Now, the task force was made up of people like researchers, historians, futurists, social scientists, even science fiction writers. And they were charged with stopping people in the future from coming into contact with nuclear waste generated in the past. And design was the tool they chose. And their approach was to design a sort of warning message. Their objective was to make sure that the message would last for at least 10,000 years. Let's see a few examples of what they came up with. Thomas Sabak, a linguist, proposed that we create a new religion. It would be known, and this is true, as the atomic priesthood. And it would be just like the Catholic Church, but charged with communicating the dangers of nuclear waste over the vast reaches of the millennia. Yeah, sure, it sounds a little funny. But what has shown more power to endure over time than organized religion? But of course, religion can rise and fall. Just ask the Scientologists. Stanislaw Lem, a science fiction writer, said that we should create a global network of satellites that would communicate about the locations and compositions of all of these global nuclear waste sites. But as we saw in the movies Gravity and The Martian, space is no sanctuary. Satellites and other spacecraft are vulnerable to the elements, and they can fail unexpectedly. So that's why Lem also proposed that we alter the DNA of plants to encode messages in them. He called these information plants. They would grow only near the waste sites and only in the presence of this powerful radiation, and their DNA, once decoded, would contain messages about each waste site's composition. Sounds good, but what if future societies don't have the ability to decipher the DNA? Or what if the plants themselves are destroyed by acts of man or nature? Okay, this is it, at last. This is the part you've been waiting for. And you know that because there's a cat on the screen. The French authors François Bastide and Paulo Fabry had a very interesting idea. They said, and again, I must specify, this is all true. This all actually happened. They said that we should breed radiation cats or ray cats. True story. They said that these ray cats would be genetically engineered to glow in the presence of dangerous radiation, and that would tell us that we're in the danger zone. Seriously, how cool is that? Sure, it sounds, a little unrealistic, but remember, humans have had a long association with cats. Egyptians worshipped them, and we domesticated them over tens of thousands of years. We even created the internet just to honor them. So it makes sense. It makes sense that future generations would also keep cats, or be kept by them from the cat's perspective. But what if they're dog people instead? Now, the task force also proposed many options for communicating through environmental design. And here we see an architect's sketch of giant, building-sized thorns that would be grown all over a waste disposal site. And the message seems clear. Stay out. This place is dangerous. It's useless for settling or for cultivation. But what if it turns into a sort of adventure sports park instead? Another approach would be to make the site look unnatural. And here we see a huge man-made square of black granite or painted concrete. The task force thought that the sun would cause the black square to become so hot that it would burn human skin if it were touched. But colors can fade, or get covered up as the lands shift. All of that is so large in terms of scale and development and cost. What if we retreat towards simplicity instead? The task force thought that comic strips could tell the story of nuclear waste. And the panels you see here show the story of how a person becomes sick by accessing the waste site. It seems simple, but what if future cultures read from bottom to top? Then they see a story where a person who is sick becomes healthy by accessing nuclear waste. Listen, long-term design is complex, and it is far more challenging than it looks at first. Each of these design scenarios has weak points. Each has flaws that could cause catastrophic failure or death. But we still have to solve this problem, because bowing to inevitability is surely worse than striving for at least some positive outcome. Or is it? And so we return to the shape under the sheet. Now, we've looked at 2 stories about designing for long periods of time, and I've shown how each of these wicked problems pulls at us even as we pull back. And that is because they are rife with ambiguity. And while they may seem like science fiction, our everyday lives are filled with the unknown, with uncertainty. We see it everywhere, and it blurs our vision, making it hard to see the shape of things. Oh, but we still know it's there. Ambiguity isn't just for scientists or engineers working on these large problems. We all deal with it all the time. And I think that as we chip away at the small ambiguities every day, that we make progress against the greater whole. So our problems don't need to last throughout the ages to be significant. That's not what makes them meaningful. What makes them truly significant is that they're ephemeral. They don't endure. They don't last. Sometimes, the things that affect us the most are not problems of the infinite. They're curiosities of the finite. The smallest problems, the ones most constrained in scope, the ones that only we know about. They're the ones that inspire empathy. They're the ones that keep us awake at night. They're the fears that force us to consider the shape under the sheet. Or if not fear, then love. Love like Carl Sagan and Anne Druyan felt for each other. The most personal, the most intimate of feelings. They don't last. Do you remember the Drake equation? In this galaxy, there's a mathematical probability of 3 million Earth-type planets. And in all of the universe, 3 million galaxies like ours. And in all of that, and perhaps more, only one of each of us. So our problems matter. You matter. I've been on this planet for over 40 years, and I've never met anyone who didn't. Because we are ephemeral too. And everything we do counts, and there are no do-overs. We're all stories in the end. So make yours a good one, eh? Because our stories matter, but our divisions don't. We have all of these labels that we use to describe ourselves, to classify our approaches and tools and the unique sorts of value that we create. So of course, we take offense. We take umbrage when someone fails to recognize the clarity we create, the particular sort of meaning that we make, our expertise in being experts. But even so, I think there's something we all share across these fields. We all grapple with uncertainty, with mysteries beyond our comprehension. So our divisions don't matter. We solve our problems together, or not at all. We're all in search of answers, and so our minor differences pale in comparison with the shape under the sheet. Because what unites us will always be far, far more important than what drives us apart. And as the shape becomes clear, so do our connections with each other. no matter what your role is, we all have something in common. We are united in solving for ambiguity. We work together to make the unclear clear. We dare. So I want to leave you with a few ways that you can respond to these gray areas of ambiguity that you see every day in your design work. Ways that you can make the unclear clear. Start by being open and direct. When you can acknowledge ambiguity in your work, you help others see it as well. So don't let it go unspoken. Instead, be upfront. Hold someone's hand and let them know that you sense the strangeness too. One way that you can reduce ambiguity is to make sure that you and your design partners agree on the problem that you are trying to solve. And then dare yourselves to take on the biggest problems you can possibly find. And never, ever let anyone dismiss your work or minimize the challenges you face. You're designers, and you make the numinous. Now, creativity only thrives in an environment where we can suppress our urge to control things. So instead, to solve the hardest problems in the world, we have to help people lose control so that they can think big, sometimes bigger than they've ever thought before. And as design leaders, we're responsible for creating the future and the culture that makes all of that possible. So the accountability that we establish in our organizations has to be flexible. After all, accountability was never meant to be used as a political tool or as a weapon. Instead, it should be more like a warm blanket. And that blanket should help people feel safe and supported and comfortable enough so that they are unafraid to try new things and to take big risks. And this is especially true when we face problems that are so vast and interconnected that we can't see the whole picture or understand their shape. So to make the most progress in our encounters and struggles with ambiguity, our accountability must always be counterbalanced by empathy. And let me share a secret with you, my friends, and this is the only real secret I know. There is no such thing as perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. And this desire, this urge, this struggle we have to somehow become perfect and to create perfect things, it distracts us from what we're supposed to be doing, making things better right now. The longer we take to solve problems by trying to be perfect means that we're allowing those problems to have more impact on more people. So we have to become comfortable with taking on risk and then getting even better over time. Perfection is not some sort of peak or plateau we somehow reach someday if only we can somehow try hard enough. Perfection is just a barrier to our creativity and progress. Now, this means that we're bound to falter, especially as we take on more and bigger chunks of ambiguity in our work. So the point isn't to succeed at all costs. I think it's to fail as often and as quickly as we possibly can. Because only failure helps us increase our knowledge and understanding of the world, and only failure helps us truly find out what people need from us. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to celebrate failure, but I damn well want to celebrate the learnings that come from it. Because if we can stop punishing failure and start rewarding learning, then we will incentivize everyone to take on more and more ambiguity in their work. So you can build leadership through failure, through humility. And I think it's the only way to build meaningful, empathetic leadership that lasts. But even so, even with all of these ideas, we can't solve every problem. We can't even, perhaps, solve the hardest problems, or sometimes the problems that matter most. But we can try. We can dare. And that effort, that process, it's what we do best. It's who we are. It's the journey we're all on as design professionals. And like all of us, that journey matters. But for now, we've reached a way station on that journey, and our time here together is almost complete. So as our signals head out to the stars, as our half-lives deplete their energy, and as entropy collapses our universe, I want you to keep one last thing in mind. We have problems, and there are issues and challenges that seek to divide us. But those divisions don't really matter, because in a way, we're all working together on the same problem. And that challenge matters so much more to the people we serve than the trivial things that seek to divide us. We're united in our recognition of this problem and our willingness to take it on. After all, it's the biggest problem there is, and the oldest, and it hides openly in plain sight. When we're faced with ambiguity, we're not afraid. And we don't run away from it. We dare to run toward it. And that's how our story ends, at least for now. Not with a bang or a whimper, but a click. After 2.8 trillion years and 1.2 quadrillion miles, everything really did turn out fine, just like I promised at the beginning. There's a lot of things you need to get across this universe of ours. Design, engineering, a warp drive. But you know the thing you need most of all? A hand to hold. Well, that and a story to share. Thank you for letting me share mine with you.